Hello there, and welcome along to episode 12 of season 2 of the Gardener Ben podcast. I confess that this week I have not had a huge amount of time in my own garden, which seems a little stressful and a little bit odd considering the time of year. However, being a professional gardener and landscaper means that I am full on and very, very busy in other people's gardens right now, and mine has to take a little bit of a back seat for the next few weeks. This is one of the main reasons why I tend to be, as a gardener, incredibly organised and normally working slightly ahead of most people's schedules, which helps as a content creator, means I'm normally sharing the things that you should be doing a couple of weeks before you actually need to do them and you're running late yourselves. One thing that I am getting on with in the garden is actually getting in my plant supports. Having had all of my hazel and bean poles delivered during the months of February and March, they've been standing in a corner patiently waiting for me to get round to using them. So I'm cutting my pea sticks into varying lengths and weaving them around my herbaceous perennials. These look a little bit obscure right at the moment, as they are the dominant features in the borders. But over the next coming weeks and months, as the herbaceous perennials and everything comes up around them, they will slowly be engulfed and completely disappear. Mark my words, as a gardener, it is far easier to get these things in early than it is to be getting them in late. And once a perennial has collapsed during spring or summer rain, it is virtually impossible to get them back up into the right locations. So getting your supports in nice and early and allowing your plants to grow naturally through them is really, really important. I will be going through quite literally hundreds and hundreds of metres of Hessian twine over the coming weeks, and we don't ever seem to be able to buy or order it quick enough. Although I'm always really disciplined with this and start hoarding it at the very beginning of the year, buying 1 or 2 balls here and there, I seem to go through literally thousands of metres in a cat's cradle of webbed string all over the garden to try and keep things upright and in the positions that they're actually naturally growing to. It's also very important you go around the garden very regularly and tie in any of your climbing and rambling roses as they produce fresh and new growth. It's so important to get these things tied in quickly so the stems are pliable and easy to train, especially if there's a gap in your display that you want to actually get filled in by growth in the coming weeks and months. Now that we're coming to the very end of the spring flowering bulb displays, it's a really good idea to start having a good assessment around your garden. I like to walk around with a series of green painted little pieces of bamboo cane, and I paint these green so I know exactly what they're for. I use different coloured markers for different reasons in the garden, and I cut bamboo canes into small sections of around 6 to 8 inches long and paint them with green paint. I go around the garden normally in late April and very, very early May, just as the bulb display is starting to go over, and actually place my small sticks into the garden so I know where I have holes in my display for next year. It just means that when it comes to emptying out my containers and drying out my bulbs for next year, when it comes to bedding them out in October and November later on this year, I know exactly where I have holes in displays and where I need to go back and plant bulbs in. Or, we all do, know exactly where not to dig, more importantly, so I'm not disturbing bulbs, especially alliums that I already have in place. So this is a great technique and something you can do. Again, these little marker sticks will be completely engulfed and completely disappear by the herbaceous perennials and roses that are rapidly coming up in the garden. Moving into the month of May is always incredibly exciting and sees us motoring towards not only Chelsea but also the Gardeners' World Solent Fair, which I'll be attending this year as well. The first peony in the garden is now breaking colour, and I'll be kicking off my peony review season over the next week or 10 days or so, bringing you around another dozen reviews, reels and moving shorts to showcase the very, very best varieties that are available here in the UK. So look out for that series of videos coming over the next couple of weeks. I don't know what it's like for you where you're growing, but the season here on the south coast of the UK is incredibly well advanced. The first rose buds are already swelling and showing some colour, and it's been a race to see which particular rose will be first into flower. Now, normally the show of roses doesn't normally start until about the very, very end of May, sometimes the first week of June, but it looks like we're going to be around a month ahead of that this year if the weather holds. And it looks like Gabriel Oak from David Austin Roses, closely followed by Ivor's Rose from Peter Beals, will be the first in flower. As soon as my trial roses, 65 of them now in the ground and awaiting my personal review, break bud, I'll also start filming there, which will coincide with the suspension of the Gardener Ben podcast just for a few months while I create a huge amount of media for you, which obviously will be available for you to view during National Rose Month on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and of course Facebook. Don't worry, I'm not hanging up the podcast just yet, and we've got some amazing guests ahead of us over the next couple of weeks. This week's guest is the ever so lovely Rob Smith from the Instagram account Robs Allotment. He's a garden writer and on the RHS panel deciding the fruit, vegetables and herbs that we grow every single year in our garden. And he's also the author of the book Grow to Eat. Rob's gardening style is very different to mine here at North Lodge. Although his garden actually occupies a very similar size and space to that here at North Lodge, if it's not tasty, if it's not usable and you can't eat it, Rob pretty much doesn't grow it, which is completely the opposite way round to the way I do things here at North Lodge. With around 70 or 80% of my space allocated to ornamentals, cut flowers and roses. Just going to prove that all of us gardeners are very different and motivated by different things. Rob and his technique of gardening in Yorkshire are a true testament to just how much produce you can actually create in a really rather small space. I'll leave Rob to introduce himself, and I hope that you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Well, on today's episode of the podcast, I'm joined by Rob from Rob's Allotment on Instagram. Rob, welcome along to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking my call. How are you?
Hi, I'm really good. How are you?
I'm incredibly well, thank you very much. Firstly, I need to apologise that we've had to move today's time. I feel really guilty that my schedule seems to be so busy all the time that I've never seemed to stop moving. So I'm sorry that we had to reschedule this morning, but thank you very much for taking the time to speak to
Don't
me.
worry.
Rob, you outrank me. This is you ranked as number 30 in the UK of the most influential gardeners. Is that correct?
I know it's good, isn't it? Yeah, I got an email through to tell me. I just sort of like I'm in the garden, just doing what I do, and yeah, I got that email come through.
How does it feel?
It's really weird, isn't it? Because you just sort of like you'll be the same as me. You're on your plot. You're just doing your thing, doing what you like and what you share. You don't sort of see that many people while you're gardening on your own. And then you get that through, and it's like, wow, actually, people do appreciate and sort of like follow what I do.
It's I must admit, people often think that being a social media content creator of any description is something that sort of connects you to hundreds of or thousands or however many people. But I often find that I think you've hit the nail on the head. Actually, it's actually a little bit lonely. I find myself with my phone, my camera.
Yeah, and a
I put
tripod.
yeah. Spend a lot of time speaking to myself, listening to myself, which is obviously not very good and not very clever. It's not very interactive. And then my other half says, "Oh, you don't put your phone down." I said, "Yeah, but I don't get to look at a lot of other people's content. I'm constantly sort of admitting content, but don't
Yeah,
really get to absolutely absorb a great deal." So yeah, seeing that and reach other people, I think, is really nice. So congratulations on that. And
thank you.
you also ranked within the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's 35, 36 in the world as well, apparently. So
fantastic. Well,
again,
huge.
it's yeah, it's weird.
Huge congratulations. So for those that
Thank you.
maybe don't they may be living under a rock, maybe they don't know exactly what you do. Tell the audience listening what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're sharing online.
Basically, my account is all about edibles. I love the fact that you can grow your own food from like a little, what looks like a stone. When I was a kid, I used to think there were stones that my granddad was planting, and
Yeah.
you'd end up with all these vegetables. And it's just the fact that all these veg that you can grow that you don't even see in a shop or in a supermarket, or they don't fit that standard size of packaging or whatever. And it's just the flavors, the colors, everything you can grow yourself. It's just that fact you got your hands in the dirt and you're growing something, then you can take it in the kitchen and you can make something brilliant from it, and you've done it all. It's not got any pesticides on it. It's not being grown in any way you don't want it to be grown. It's just amazing.
So for you, it's edibles and fruit and vegetables rather than what
Yeah,
we would
or
describe as ornamental.
yeah, do you know what? I like the ornamentals, and my garden's split into, because it's on a hill, it's split into three levels. So the levels like between the tiers, the sloping bits, they are covered in flowers and ornamentals and everything, but that is just not my passion. That's just to make it look pretty and to bring some like pollinators into the ground. If you can't eat it, it's not the most important to me, but if you can eat it, brilliant.
So you're completely on the flip side to me. I mean, I do grow fruit and vegetables. I've got a fairly substantial vegetable. Well, no, I need to be careful what I say now because it's very misleading. I've had to dig up most of the vegetable and cutting garden now because it's all blimmin' roses. I've kind of got myself pigeonholed, and there's so many roses. I was saying to people online this weekend that actually I won't be growing as many dahlias as I would normally be. There won't be any lettuce, radish. There'll be some tomatoes, cucumbers, and chilies this year, but I've had to give up so much space for actual reviewing of product that they've got
Yeah.
so many roses that yeah, I mean we don't have an endless supply of space. So yeah, there won't be a huge amount grown by me this year food wise. So please no lockdown and no food shortages because otherwise we're going to be going hungry.
Yeah, I was going to say there'll be a lot of rose water.
Just going to say we'll be living off of rose sugar. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So for yourself, Rob, what does it start with? Does it start with a crop or does it start with a recipe?
I'd say, to be honest, it starts with what we sort of like we eat and what we like.
Yeah.
I do get asked quite a lot, like what should people new gardeners start with, or what should people concentrate on? And I always say, what do you eat?
Yeah.
Because it's fine this time of year. You should be starting your potatoes off and things like that. But if you don't eat potatoes, why are you growing them?
Well, I'm going to be doing mine
Start.
in about 15. Well, after I've spoken to you, they've been chitted.
Yeah, there's your reminder. But it's like what do you eat? What do you like? What do you enjoy? What do you use a lot of? And what's expensive, to be honest?
Yes, yeah.
So things like if you like strawberries, the price of them in the shops can be a fortune. So get your own grown, get some different varieties grown, get some different coloured flowers grown because there are ones with red flowers, pink flowers, as well as the white flowers. You can go for day neutral ones, so you can have strawberries until the first frosts. They're not just those strawberries that crop in June anymore and for Wimbledon. So if you can have strawberries from May until the first frost. So if you
Yeah.
want those things, get them grown. Do a bit of research, get them grown. And then it's like, do you eat them fresh? Do you want to preserve them? How do you want that to go? So like I grow loads of tomatoes, loads of different types, but we eat them dried. We have them in pasta sauces. I make soups. We bottle them. So my crop lasts me all year.
Hmm.
And that's the aim, to try and have something that I've grown like every day of the year, especially when it comes
Wonderful.
to things like tomatoes. You know what it's like in the winter, the depths of winter. You buy a tomato from the shop, it's either as hard as a stone or orange because it's never even got red. It's been grown under lights, it's got no flavour. And you just think, you know what, I'll just pop open a jar of my sun-dried tomatoes and it takes you straight back to summer.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
That's the idea for me.
And I suppose the same say could be said about the strawberries you mentioned a second ago. I mean, obviously, I'm lucky enough to live in the capital of strawberry country here in Hampshire. We are absolutely famed for our strawberries.
Yeah.
All of those heading up to Wimbledon. But again, you've knocked the nail on the head. The produce grown and harvested when it's actually ripe and growing naturally is always so much better and so much tastier. So yeah,
Absolutely. Well, yeah, it's like things like, do you know what? I went into the garden this morning, wandering around with a cup of tea, and I've seen the first spear of asparagus just starting to poke through. It's about a
yes,
centimetre up, and you think that flavour, that homegrown flavour, is nothing like what you buy from the shops. And yeah, it's fleeting. It's like 6 weeks worth of a crop, but it tastes so much better. But then you've got people who'll go and buy them in November, coming in from Peru or wherever. They've got no flavour.
no,
Just it's that thing. Celebrate what you've grown, and it might be for 6 weeks, but it makes it taste so much better because you know
yeah.
you've grown it, and it's so seasonal compared to having everything every day of the year.
And your asparagus, how long have you had that in the ground? Because it's a fairly lengthy process, isn't it? Getting that to establish and getting it to cropping.
Yeah, so I got these a good few years ago. They were on my allotment for about 3 or 4 years, and then we moved house, and I dug them up and brought them with me. So they've been in the garden now about 7 years.
Hmm.
But they're brilliant. They get better year on year, and as long as you keep them well watered, the spears are as thick as your thumb. As soon as they come up, they're not like these tiny little spindly ones you get from the supermarket. They're proper asparagus, and
Hmm.
they're absolutely stunning. Even fresh, they're just so tender, absolutely gorgeous.
I saw on the Wonderful World of the Tinterweb, I think about a year ago, how they actually harvest. harvest asparagus with sort of people suspended on sort of little
Yeah, like
sort
a
of
platform, isn't
little
it?
tuk-tuk wagon dragging along a
Yeah,
platform with these people sort of hanging in sort of holsters from the back, sort of
yeah,
working. I mean, because to save their backs, but yeah, very very time consuming work. So yeah. And
yeah.
what will you be cooking with your asparagus? How will you be enjoying that?
We normally have it just simply either steamed or griddled. So when it's raw, like toss it in a bit of olive oil and just put it on a griddle pan until it just starts to char. Serve it like that with a couple of poached eggs, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Very nice too. Very nice too. Because you seem to be an incredibly accomplished cook as well.
Do you know what? I love cooking, and I think that's part of it. It gives you that inspiration when you're actually growing stuff yourself. You think, oh, what could I put it with? Have I got any of these herbs? Have I got any of those onions? Have I got, I don't know, potatoes ready? And then you become very almost, it's almost like ready, steady cook. Instead of getting a bag of veggies, you've got a garden full of veg, and it's like, do you know what? I need to create something out of what's ready. So you
Yeah.
become a lot more capable at producing different things just from what's ready.
Yeah, yeah. It's a again another good point. I mean, I'll often come in from the garden with a big bundle of stuff, and my other half will look at me. What am I supposed to do with that? It's like I don't know. We kind of got to work that out now because it won't
Yeah,
keep for very long. So
exactly. Yeah, or oh, not lettuce again, or like, do you know what? I'm talking about the asparagus. I love it, but when it gets to week 6, you're sort of like, right, shall I make some asparagus soup or shall I make a quiche and freeze it? Because to be honest, we're sick of it after 6 weeks, but it's still amazing.
well, it's lovely to hear that in even how can may I ask? I mean, obviously you don't have the allotment anymore. You're gardening exclusively now from home. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So,
Yeah.
so I mean, the amount of space that you're working with, so people get a bit of a gist of what kind of area you're across. What kind of space have you got in the garden?
So the garden's about a third of an acre, but only half of that is sort of like for the kitchen garden bit.
Yes. Yeah.
So the rest of it is obviously space for the dogs. We've got a bit of decking. Just had a new outdoor kitchen built, which
I've
is
seen
absolutely
it. It's
brilliant.
absolutely beautiful, absolutely
And
stunning
do you
area.
know what? I love that. I've wanted that for years, and it's brilliant because you can just get those veggies and come like in the summer, just come down. You've got the barbecue on the go, the pizza oven's there. We've got a sink and everything, so you don't even have to come into the house.
A
You can
log,
just
but you've got a log burner and
yeah, that's for at night when the wine comes out of the fridge. But that's the
yeah,
idea, isn't it? It's that outdoor lifestyle. If we've got the weather for it, why not? And
yeah,
sometimes it used to be the sun goes down, it gets a little bit cool, and you think, oh, I could stay out here, but it's getting too cold. So now it's just throw a few logs on the log burner outside, and yeah, it just warms that space up and it makes it
lovely.
just so much more usable.
Very nice. We can't be typically British people and moan about the weather, but last summer was well, it wasn't the summer, was it? I mean, the
No,
fire bowl and the terrace here sat, and well, it was the first full
was it a
summer we.
pond?
Well, no, the terrace was its first year that it had been physically done, and full year, and we didn't manage to sit out on it once. It was literally too cold, as you said. It was
Yeah,
even if you lit the fire, it just wasn't warm enough to sit out,
no.
and you end up sort of shaking. And so no, I'm really fingers crossed. Hopefully this year that we actually get some weather and we can actually sit out and actually enjoy the weather.
Yeah, touch wood.
So you're basically gardening on about the same sort of size plot as me. So it's really interesting to hear that you can, I mean, allocate that much sort of space to, for instance, asparagus, as we've spoken about before, and you've got enough to keep, that you and your other half, and I speak assuming you're cooking for other people, and still being able to
Yeah,
can and
yeah,
actually
yeah.
preserve a little bit from that as well. So you've obviously got a very, very productive space.
Yeah, I think the idea is like I've got the raised beds, so all of those have different veggies in them, but there are things that are sort of like dotted around as well. So a lot of the fruit trees and fruit bushes are actually in the borders, those slopes.
Hmm.
I've got a lot of cordon fruit trees, so you'll see at the top of the garden by the greenhouse, all the level just before you go down the stairs, there's like a banister all the way along,
Yeah,
and that's got fruit trees all the way along it. So it's trying to make the most of that space because
yeah.
otherwise it's just dead space and a piece of wood that you rest your hand on. So why not train those trees up it? Or on the next level, I've got thornless blackberries.
Hmm.
So you don't get tangled, you don't get scratched to bits, but they're just trained along the wood.
Yeah.
So why not make space of it, what would otherwise be dead space?
You're literally packing it in at every angle, which is a really good,
Absolutely, yeah,
really good suggestion to people as well. I mean, I did quite a lot of pruning tutorials this year on fruit and trying to explain to the audience about why we train fruit either, as a espalier or cordon, as you've mentioned there, or fan train them, and what again, the concept is very similar to that of roses and climbing roses. You do it to slow the sap down and actually produce a larger, much higher quality of fruit in a much smaller space. And
yeah,
again, and what I try and do through my accounts is not just tell people what to do, it's why we do it. And I
yeah.
think that's really important. And it doesn't, or normally it doesn't hit the mark with everybody. But again, I think if you sometimes explain the science behind things and why we do things, it kind of little light bulb goes off in someone's head and they think, actually, oh, now I know why I do it. Yeah, I should do it. And I won't just ignore the fact that the online gardener is telling me to do X, Y, and Z. There is a reason behind it.
Exactly. And it's like, say you've got a big bed that you're growing stuff in. Well, do you know what? If you want to cut it in half and make it a bit more manageable, why not put, like, I don't know, an apple step over on it? It's
Yes,
only
yeah.
going to be 45 centimeters high at the most, maybe a 3 feet either side, so like 6 feet or even 4 feet, and you can get fruit from it. But it just gives that extra dimension to it as well. It doesn't look just like a bare piece of brown dirt that you're gardening in. It actually gives it a bit of structure. It starts to make it look a bit better, and it makes it more productive from a space that is what you couldn't get that much more from it if you didn't have that step over there.
No, no,
But then you're making that mini climate, like mini um, climate for other things. So let's say it's the shade from that apple is the perfect space to start growing your lettuce in the summer. So
mhm.
then you've got more of a harvest, but because it's in the shade, they last longer, they don't bolt. So you're extending your harvest by growing something in the shade of another plant, and it's working for both of them. So it's
Yeah.
almost, I wouldn't say it's companion planting, but you know your space and you know what's happening, and you're making the most from it.
Yeah, I've got a 5 tier Espalier James Grieve apple here, which we brought with us. So again, we've been in this house for very coming on 8 years now, and this one came with us from our last property. Obviously, expensive plant to buy, so I dug it up and brought it with us. And
Yeah.
people were astonished this year. I mean, it seems to do one year really heavy, and then one year it's a little bit mediocre. But last year was a particularly good for apples here, and I got
Yeah.
something in the region of about 14 kilos off of one tree. I mean, it was just, yeah, and luckily, obviously,
It's crazy, isn't it?
that particular variety does store particularly well, and I really love a firm fleshed tart apple personally,
Yeah.
the one I particularly like. So yeah, I munched my way through them for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. They're absolutely glorious. But yeah,
Yeah.
you
And
produce
it's
a
and
quite.
it's and it's that thing with, like you say, with the planting, you brought that with you because you like it, and like you say, some plants can be very expensive, but it's also the time it takes to get them to that stage as
Yes,
well.
quite. Yeah, yeah,
So you can buy an apple tree and it might be a tiny little maiden and it might only be quite reasonably priced, but just spending a little bit more is going to give you a bigger crop straight away, a more established plant straight away. And it's that thinking about where you're going to put things, and how long they are going to take if they're not an annual veg crop to actually start to produce.
yeah. So would you mind me asking? I mean, are you do you have a background in horticulture, or is this something that you've arrived to through passion, or have you got a formal education in it, or?
No, no, no. So I started, I've always grown with my grandparents because my mum and dad used to work a lot. So I used to stay with my grandparents, and my granddad had a great big old council house with a huge garden.
Mhm.
And he used to use that like an allotment basically and grow everything. So if they didn't grow it, we never ate it.
Okay.
And we started there. And then I used to fly for Virgin Atlantic for donkey's years.
Uh-huh.
Um, Always loved gardening, always been gardening, but never thought of it as a passion. Because when I was growing up, if you did gardening or anything like that, it was sort of almost like looked down upon. It was for people that couldn't do anything else
Hmm.
back then, which is totally wrong and has changed now. But that's how it was sort of like portrayed. And then I was in LA with work one day, and I'd had a few too many gin and tonics, shall we say. And this thing came up on Twitter at the time saying, do you grow your own stuff? Do you preserve it? Do you cook with it? And do you grow your own flowers? Now, you grow your own flowers. I don't, to be honest. The nearest I get is a few daffodils shoved in a jam jar. But
Yeah.
I said yes, thinking it was for a magazine article. And it was actually for a TV program that was on years ago on BBC Two called the Big Allotment Challenge.
Hmm.
So it was like the Bake Off, but for gardeners.
Yeah.
And I went through that and won that, and then got approached by Sutton Seeds years ago to come and work with them on different things, and it's sort of gone from there. So then I got asked if I'd write magazine articles and do stuff like that, and now I'm basically I work with different horticultural companies to source, select, and help breed new types of vegetable seed, flower seed, and vegetable plants.
And so you're basically doing what I'm doing, but with the fruit and vegetables rather than the ornamentals.
Yes, yeah, basically, yeah. So I get to eat it at the end.
Yeah, okay. Well, I get to make a lot of sugar and maybe the odd jam, and that's and get my hands shredded by thorns. Quite often I do sort of look at the state of my hands and my forearms and think I really am regretting my life choices.
Yeah, I
But
look like I'm being attacked.
yes, so, so that's really interesting. Of course, that's led you now to write and release your first book.
Yes, that's
So
right.
huge,
Yeah,
huge congratulations on that. That the book is
thank
is
you.
out to buy called Grow to Eat.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? Is that something that you found? I mean, this sounds like a little bit of a leading question. I'm going to lead it into because I'm at the very beginning stages of my own book now,
Yeah.
and technology for me has moved it forward to a point where someone like me, who is not particularly good with a pen in their hand and can't spell for toffee, and has a real problem with the written word. Now I can actually dictate it. So all of this the rubbish that comes out of my mouth, I can actually dictate straight onto a device and then edit it. So how did the book start for you?
I basically got approached to say, would I like to write a book?
Okay.
I'd always thought about it and thought, do I want to, do I not? And because I never knew where to start, it was just one of those things that it's a lovely idea and you
Hmm.
never sort of got round to it. And then
That's
then when
pretty
I
much
got
what it's been like for me for the last 18 months. It's been one of these pipe dreams, and it doesn't. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, yeah, I got approached for that and thought, well, do you know what? I'll have a go. So let's see what we want to do. And then it was sort of like seriously thinking, what do I want to do?
Hmm.
What do I want from this book? What do I want it to look like? What do I want it to sound like? And I remember going and having a meeting and saying, look, if I do this, I want this to be my book about my garden with what I grow. I didn't want to have, say, stock images or anything like that. So I said all the photos in the book I want to be from my garden. I
Yeah.
want it to be things that I've grown rather than, I don't know, just like getting one from a stock image of a cauliflower or something. It's got to be the one that I've grown.
Yeah.
Because if I'm
It's got
talking
to.
about how to grow it and what to do, surely you've got to do it yourself to show
It's
people. You can't just say it, you've got to do it.
it's got to be authentically you, isn't it? It's got to be. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So we had Sam come up, the photographer, who was amazing. And I said, look, I love the photos in some books, but I find some gardening books can almost be like science textbooks from school. They
Yes.
can
Yeah.
be very almost like almost dictate it, or can be very amateurish with the photos, and it's not pretty. And I
Yeah.
said, "Do you know what? You look at all these photos in cookbooks and recipes and things like that and online and say Waitrose magazines and other magazines are available, but they always look beautiful. And
Yeah.
I'm like, why don't the vegetables look like that? Because that's where it's coming from. So we ended up getting Sam, who is actually a food photographer, to come and take the photos for the book because I wanted that sexy sort of like inspirational look of food,
Yeah.
but in the garden, and got him to come and do that. And he came up every month for a year, I think it was.
Yeah.
Well, twice a month on some of them, just to take the photos. And it was absolutely brilliant. It'd be like, right, what's going to be ready? This is what I've written about. What's going to be ready? What photos do we need? And he just come up and he was like a garden ninja because he'd just disappear. It wasn't staged. It was just get on with it, do it, and I'll be taking photos. If I need you
Yeah.
to stop or slow down, I'll tell you, but we want it to look authentic. We don't want it to look staged. It
Yeah.
should look as if you're just in the garden and someone's like looking over the fence at what you're doing.
Just a
And
little, just a
I
little,
think
little peep into your world.
absolutely, and I think he pictured it brilliantly. He got it down to a T for how I wanted it to look.
Amazing.
And I wanted it to look as good so that if it's on your coffee table, people will flick through and think, do you know what? Those tomatoes look amazing, or that cauliflower looks stunning, rather than, oh, is this a textbook that your kids have brought home from school?
No final word about a cauliflower has ever been muttered. That cauliflower looks stunning.
Exactly.
Now, I'm going to make a suggestion. Are you familiar with Luai, who is the user or the creator behind Urban Farm and Kitchen?
Do you know what? I might be, but I'm
He's
terrible with names.
he's from Canada.
Yep.
He was on the podcast with me a couple of weeks back. Go and have a look at his account because his account is super sexy.
Yeah.
He has got photography because another part of his he not only grows but he cooks and he pickles and he does recipes. Does a lot of work for now quoted by Martha Stewart a huge amount. I think he's well over 100 recipes doubled back with on the Martha Stewart's website. But he gets that whole sort of super sexy, very artistic. I mean, it literally sucks you into a world of color, and of course, it awakens your senses of sight and sound and smell, and it just makes you want to sort of dive into his book. And his book is like yours, is very beautifully done. So have a take if you don't follow him already.
Yeah, I
Have a
will.
look at
Yeah,
his
yeah.
account. And again, very authentically him. So yeah, it's a good recommend from me if you want to go and have a look at that one.
Excellent. Yeah, I will do.
But it sounds like your book process has started at the very beginning, like mine has. I mean, for me, I've been puzzling and quandering over it for some time, and loads of people said, "Oh, Ben, you should do a calendar, you should do a bookazine, you should do X, Y, and Z." And obviously, my
Yeah.
footprint is massively smaller than yours, but it's been something that's been battered around for some time. But I've decided to start with the process as it works for me, and for
Yeah.
me, it generally what starts with an image. It always
Yeah.
starts with something that sparks my imagination and sparks something. And of course, I mean, for instance, flowers, I just get immersed in, especially with roses, but I get immersed into that world. And for me, I'm working backwards, which a lot of people will think is really bizarre. But I've actually now employed a photographer who I'm going to be working with, and he's coming to the garden every month. It might be more regular. He might do 3 or 4 trips over sort of June and July as we hit the first flush. But the idea is to start with the images and then work backwards, which a lot of people will think is bizarre. But for me, the text will come naturally once I have the image to work from. So
I
that's
was
where
going to say
I'm.
there's nothing worse than it's almost like when you get a recipe book where you've got this what sounds like an amazing recipe, but there's no photo.
No,
You can wax lyrical about a plant all you want, but if you haven't got a photo or it's not the best photo, it doesn't necessarily hit someone's imagination.
no.
And sometimes it can be just it can be almost like a mediocre variety or cultivar, but the photo just blows it out of the world, like blows it out of the water, and it looks amazing. So that
Or they've
the way
forgotten
you're
to.
doing it is perfect.
Yeah, well, for me, yeah. Or the food writer has forgotten to write in the first caption that you should prepare it the day before and put it in the fridge. So you get halfway through it
Yeah,
and then get to the last part of the
yeah,
text. Because let's face it, we're not all of us always read the entire recipe before we start it. You kind of look at
no,
the ingredients and all the method is this, that, and the other. You get to the last paragraph, it's like this needs to be stored in the fridge for up to 6 hours. You think, oh bugger, I wanted to eat that tonight and I can't.
exactly. Yeah, no, it's true, and it's like they say, isn't it? A picture tells a thousand words, and a good photo can be absolutely brilliant in a book or wherever.
Yeah. So you mentioned tomatoes, you mentioned asparagus. We've talked briefly about apples. So what is your ultimate favorite thing to grow in the garden? What would you sort of normally gravitate towards?
For the last few years, it has been tomatoes and things like that. Tomatoes, chilies, things that are a little bit different.
Yeah.
So it's
And you're
very rare.
focusing on the very unusual varieties and the more heritage varieties of tomato. Is that correct?
Yeah, it can be so it can be the heritage type, it can be the different colours. So there's very few small red cherry tomatoes that you'll ever find in my garden
Hmm.
because I just think there are so many of them. You can buy them in the shops. Why necessarily grow it? Why not go for a blue one? Why not go for a striped one? Why not go for one that's a different shape or different texture rather than being your bog standard average type of thing?
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just not for me.
No.
I like going for that thing that you have to sort of like dig around a bit to find or discover or something that's just not your bog standard average. And don't get me wrong, some of them are absolutely terrible. They taste terrible, they grow terrible, they don't work at all. But that's part of gardening. It's to try it. And then you've got your regulars that you always grow, or you've got something suddenly you'll find, and it's just like this little hidden gem, and you
Hmm.
think, that's it, that's on my list every single year now.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I think it, especially with vegetables, because most of them are annual, it gives you such opportunity every single year to make something totally different. It's not like your fruit or your roses or whatever, where you have to be a little bit more considered because that plant's going to stay there for a good number of years. When these tomatoes are out, they're gone. So it
Yes.
doesn't really matter if it's, as long as it's not terrible. I know it's terrible when I start with it because that'd be a foolhardy thing to do, but it doesn't necessarily matter because next year I won't be growing that if it's no good.
No. Okay. And that's led you to be working alongside the RHS in their vegetable and herb group. Is that, yeah, is that correct? Is that why you went
Yeah,
off to
so
Italy at the beginning of the year, or is that something you still can't talk
no,
about?
that was something else.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'm on the forum that decides the fruit, veg, and herb AGMs. So
Hmm.
when vegetables are awarded the AGMs and everything, I'm on that forum that helps with that. But I'm also on the new RHS. It's the fruit, veg, and herb committee. So
Yeah.
well, they call it. It's not a committee anymore. Sorry, it's called an expert group now.
Hmm.
So I think there are about 25 of us
Yeah.
on there. So we look after all the fruit, veg, and herb for the RHS and go around and we'll do like outreach things. We might go and visit allotments and things. We go to visit different breeders or different companies on how things work. We'll look at things like the Grow Your Own app that they've got out, so you can look on your phone if you're not sure about different things, and the website. So yeah, it's all part of that. It's all really exciting, really nice, and really sort of like the next step, shall we say?
Hmm.
Because it's brilliant on social media to actually explain to people and talk to people about things, but sometimes there can be things that are a little bit misleading, or not necessarily how they should or you would do them. Not that
Yeah.
there are always certain set rules to do things. I'm always up for trying something new and trying to break the rules.
Yeah.
But it's great to be part of an institution like that that is so well known worldwide for what they do and how they do it and the high standard, and to be recognized to be actually good enough to be part of that as well.
Amazing. And then, as you've said, it's I'm always telling people, especially when I'm live, that it's your garden, it's your rules. Although I have a very formal and traditional horticultural education, I've been gardening for a huge amount of time. I've got a first class degree behind me. I'm very, very um my mindset is very much the same, is that actually if it's your garden, it's your rules. If you do something this year the way that you want to do it and you have great results, well, keep doing it. Give it a little tweak. That
Yeah,
people get so bogged down into the fact, oh, I saw this on YouTube or this content creator said this. It's like, again, do what's right for you, and if it doesn't work for you, tweak it, add a little bit of that, sprinkle a little bit of somebody else's ethos into it. all i can tell you is
absolutely.
all I can tell you is what works for me and how I was trained. And again, I've changed what I do over the years, from and we have to keep responding to the weather conditions and climate change. And the
Yeah,
season seems to get we seem to get later and later frost. The winters seem to get milder and wetter, but then we get these very, very late cold snaps, and the summers tend to get hopefully dry. Well, not hopefully, but they've been traditionally drier and hotter for much longer periods of weather, with dry without any rain whatsoever. I mean, the longest we've gone
yeah,
down here on the south coast, we had a spell not last year but in 2023 where we had 9 weeks without a drop of rain.
yeah,
For a lot of people in places, because I'm speaking to a very international crowd with the roses. I mean, I get messages from Texas saying, "Oh, it's not hot, and it doesn't rain for weeks on for months on end here." It's like, that's Texas. I mean, it's here in
I was
England's
gonna
coast
say
of
we're,
here in
yeah, we're on a little rock
yeah, here
down
in
here.
England's coastal garden, I kind of expect rain twice a week. And for us to go 9 weeks without rain, so I'm always saying to people, amend what you do, adjust what you do, and make it
Yeah,
work for you. And make notes. I mean, I'm always making notes on my phone. I make notes in my little journal book. And again, have a look back at what you did last year. And if it didn't quite work, have a little bit of a tweak and have a go with something else.
yeah, absolutely.
So well, we mentioned earlier. Can you tell us why you headed over to Italy, or are you still being cagey about that one?
Uh, I
You
can't.
can't,
It's
can you?
no, it's basically some really like revolutionary, like totally groundbreaking. They're what you would class as traditional plants,
Yeah.
but the what this plant can now do is totally different.
Okay, all right. So we
So
shall
yeah,
be on
brilliant.
tenterhook. We shall all be on tenterhooks until you can share that with you. I'm also dying to know because you are you said you were sort of trialing and growing lots of different things. Have you had any contact with the mangel wurzel?
I have,
Because
yes.
I see that's
Think of
taking
it as
over
the
the internet.
Yeah, it's just a big ugly beetroot, basically.
Okay.
They used to be used as fodder beets, so to feed animals.
Yes.
So they can be you can eat them. They can be a little bit more earthy than a beetroot, shall we say, and can go quite woody when they get big. But I think it's just that fact of it's almost like something from Harry Potter,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's like drag it out of the ground screaming.
Well,
Um,
from what I've seen, it sort of almost sort of flops on the ground. It kind of has very little roots. I can't really see how it's attached to the floor, but it's kind of
yeah,
just sort of
they
flops there like a
I
um
think it's one of those things that people want to grow because they see it and it just looks so odd.
yeah.
I'd be very surprised if everybody who grows it actually eats it. It's just one of those things. It's almost like the beetroot version of when people grow Carolina Reaper. People love to grow the really hot chilies. They might eat one in a year, and the rest of them either get composted or used for like scaring the bejesus out of kids and friends and having jokes and laughs. But it's just the fact that people want to grow these types of things, and it seems to have got that cult following of yeah, growing it, and the name helps, doesn't it? It's just such a weird, wacky type of name.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So I think we can probably expect to see lots of those being used as doorstops towards the end of the year.
Yeah, or on compost heaps, to be honest.
Well, apparently you can eat the foliage much as you would do beetroot as well, so you can crop that, and it slightly sweeter apparently than a beetroot, and slightly earthier than a sugar beet. So I suppose
Yeah,
you've got the description absolutely spot on. So I
yeah.
did think whether I should have a go with one or two of those this year, and I thought,
You've got to
oh
have the space. Well, you'll only have space for one or two of them. They're massive, aren't they? I
well. and then
think
and
it's
then
bigger than my dog.
and then and then you literally like, now what do I do with it? Yeah, what
Yeah,
recipes can I work out on that?
yeah.
Now we spoke just briefly before we started today's recording that you've been visited by some pigeons overnight who've eaten your kale.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to say what I called them, am I?
You can say whatever you want. This is that you don't need to censor yourself here. You're in a safe space.
No, I was weeding yesterday and moving some stuff around, and I've got some. They're not the biggest kales in the world because they were planted late last year, but I just wanted them for some nice young leaves and took the cloche off the top of them. And you know when you know what it's like at the end of the day, you're starting to put your tools away, you get distracted by something. All the tools went back in the shed, came back in the house. Never thought anything of it. Didn't bat an eyelid. Made a cup of tea this morning, went out to the garden and thought, oh bugger! Literally, I've got just you couldn't even tell it was a kale plant. It just looks like these stalks sticking out the ground.
Oh
Every bit of
no.
leaf has just gone from both of them. But luckily, I don't grow them all in the same place. This was just like a couple of plants,
Okay.
and everything else is covered. But I just thought typical. And then you can hear this boo from the tree, and you see this big fat pigeon, and I just think, is it free? If I make it into a pigeon pie, is it free range?
Yeah, I believe it would be free range. Yes, yeah. We have again, people often get into these conversations about pest and disease problems in the garden, and people always say, "Well, your hostas always look so amazing. How do you not have any slugs and snails?" And we are blessed with a huge amount because we live quite rurally, surrounded by sort of farmland and marshland and floodplain.
Yeah,
That We have an awful lot of birds in the garden, which are absolutely amazing. But my next door neighbour, I love them to pieces. They're very nice people. I really do like them a lot, but they do feed the pigeons, and I am
yeah,
overrun with wood pigeons.
yeah.
Um, and Ethel,
And they're not small, are they? They're
actually, they're getting
they're
bigger
like
and
a
bigger.
small chicken. Yeah, they're like a small chicken. They come here and they sit on the fence, and the dogs will bark at them, or you walk up to it clapping to try and get it to walk, like fly away, and they just stare at you till you're about 2 feet away. They're just so bold.
Well, I wish I could get Ethel to bark at them. Our Labradoodle thinks they're amazing and wants to play with them. Not as in wants to play with them sort of in a vicious way and sort of with her teeth, but she just say, "Oh,
Yeah,
great, it's another living thing I could play with." And I was
yeah,
talking to a gentleman from British Columbia, Brad from Select Roses, who's got a poodle.
yeah.
He breeds and sells roses over in British Columbia, and he has a pair of eagles that visit his nursery, and his
Oh
poodle
wow.
actually barks at these eagles, which are actually probably big enough to take this poodle away. I mean, they're enormous. Their wingspans are like 3 meters. But yeah,
Yeah.
I can't even get Ethel to bark at a pigeon or a squirrel. She just sort of sits and looks at them, and she's utterly useless as far as pests. Sort of scaring off pigeons. So yeah, I feel your pain this morning. So hopefully your kale will recover.
Yeah,
and
I think that one's definitely a goner.
they'll be hard cut back, will they? And
Yeah,
to let to come again.
exactly. Prune to the ground.
So this year, is there anything special that you're growing in the garden that's new?
Do you know what? I'm trying to grow a couple more sort of like perennial veg type things.
Yes.
So I've gone for a couple of they're climbers and they flower. So they're both beautiful flowers, and one of them is scented.
Hmm.
So I've gone for American ground nuts, which are they produce an edible tuber, which is a bit like a chestnut type flavor.
Yeah.
And that produces really nice. They almost look like wisteria flowers
Okay.
or lupin flowers,
Yes.
and they're scented. So that's going to go up an obelisk. That's going to be really nice because I can just leave it there, appreciate it, have a nice look at it, and then dig it up at the end and eat it.
So out of
Um,
interest, are they part of the legume family? If they look like a lupin, are they part of the pea family, or are they not related at all?
do you know what? I'm not 100% sure. So as we
Okay.
speak, I'm Googling it just to see what it is.
Because I suppose if they're producing some sort of tuber, they're obviously nitrogen setting. So I would assume they may be part of the P and B family.
So they're known as American groundnuts, potato bean, or what is it? Hopnis, or Indian potato vine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And they do look very much like a pea,
Hmm.
the flower.
Yeah.
Yeah, a perennial vine. So basically, what you can do is just for us, you'd either have to mulch it really well, or dig it up, just put it in a pot, stick it in the cold greenhouse or cold frame, and then plant it out again the next year.
Because you're
So
gardening up in Yorkshire, aren't you? So you're experiencing
yeah,
a little bit more colder weather than we will do here down on
yeah.
the soft south coast, where it barely gets cold.
Well, do you know what? We get the wet as well, which is the worst thing
Yeah,
because we get say
combination.
6 months of just dank wet. So anything like wood or anything that's in the ground or tubers, they do really rot quite
Hmm.
quick here, just because it's just so damp all the time. But I've gone for that one, and I've gone for Mashau, which is a climbing nasturtium.
Okay.
So that has really pretty, like orangey, reddy yellow flowers. Again, looks like a nasturtium foliage, but will climb up to about 2 meters.
Yeah.
And again, that produces it's like a South American type tuber. So it's like a bit like an oca, a bit like a potato type thing. And again, all summer, lovely plant, and then you can dig up those tubers at the end. So it just gives something a bit different,
Yeah.
but it gives me another edible in the borders where it's normally just ornamental stuff. But again, I can eat it.
Yeah. Fantastic. So
So
again,
that's the aim of the game.
adding another layer to it again.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And you, like myself, you have subscription based content available online for people to sign up to.
Yeah.
What can people expect to see on your subscription content?
Do you know what? I just try and show like hints and tips of what people can do, and what's available, things that are a little bit different, and try and explain sort of like what you can do to get the most out of what you're growing and where you grow it.
Hmm. And doing things like sort of grow alongs and
Yeah,
things with.
I'm doing a grow along. I'm actually doing one at the minute for like an open one for everyone for tomatoes and things,
Yeah.
and for chilies and peppers because it's that time of year to do it.
Yeah.
And it's just those simple little tips of what to do. Like at the minute, I'm taking like chopping my tomato plants in half. So literally chop them in half and it produces two runners. So you can get twice as many tomatoes from the one plant in a smaller space.
Yeah. And then
So,
are
so
you rooting the bit you're cutting off, or are you discarding that?
Absolutely, yeah. So you can route that again. So I like the fact that you can help people with different ways of growing and saving a bit of money. So we all
Yeah.
know what it's like with tomato plants. Some of these really good new varieties can be like say £4 for four seeds.
And you might get four or
So
six in a packet. Yeah.
exactly. So do you know what? If you want more than that, or if one of them doesn't grow, why not take a cutting from it, produce another plant? So you can double the amount of plants just by taking that little cutting. And especially for people who've got like a normal average size greenhouse that might be like a, I don't know, a 6 by 8 greenhouse. They're not very high. I'm 6'3" and I can't stand up in those. Like
Well,
by the actual,
I've been crafty with mine. I mean, I mean, you're a giant in comparison to me. I'm 5'7". I'm almost a Loompa Loompa. But I put mine up on railway sleeper bed up
oh yeah,
the
to make
tall
it
way. So
taller.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Again, just because when it comes to tomatoes and cucumbers and growing things in the greenhouse, you need that extra little bit of eave height. So we only
exactly.
gave it sort of 35 to 40 centimeters in height, but it makes all the difference. So you're not ducking
Yeah,
down to get through the door. The only
no,
difficulty with it is I've got a step over seal, door seal, which is
oh yeah, yeah.
a little tad annoying. But I must admit, I do like the extra little bit of height in there.
But this is the thing. So if you hadn't done that, you think the eaves on those greenhouses can be quite low, and that's
Yes.
normally where people grow their tomatoes by the window. So you're not letting it get to it's 6, 8 feet tall with all those trusses on it. So if you take the growing tip out of a tomato, it produces 2 leaders. So then what you can do is you can train the two of those to the eaves.
Yeah.
Fine, it might only be 5, 6 feet tall, but you can get 3 or 4 trusses off each one, or
So,
5 trusses off each one, so you're getting more
so
from the same
you're
plant.
cordoning tomatoes basically.
Absolutely, yeah. Turn it into a double and get all that fruit going sideways rather than just straight upwards.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And again, you've through your setup at home, you've got more than one greenhouse.
Yeah, so I've got a small greenhouse which I use as a like a propagation greenhouse. So that's got heat and lights in there.
Hmm.
And then at the top of the garden, I've got my big greenhouse, which is all like just natural. It's not heated at all, and that's where everything either grows in the summer or through the winter with no heat. And then I've just got a couple of cold frames around, and I've got a lean-to on the side of the garage, which at this time of the year is just full of citrus because they'll just die if they're outside in Yorkshire now. And
Yeah.
then come May, they'll go outside, which gives me room for about another 6 or 7 tomato plants and a couple of other things that go in there for the summer.
So you're shuffling to let stuff from one place to another, like the rest of us.
Oh, it's the hokey cokey. And when you get to the end of April, beginning of May, trying to harden plants off and not forget to leave them outside and it's frosty, oh, you know what it's like. It literally is in out, in out.
Shuffling all about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can just before we wrap up our conversation today, can you give anybody that's fairly new to gardening, because I'm always quite astonished by who's listening to the podcast. It's that a lot of people in America and a lot of people in Holland are listening along, a lot of people in Canada, they like my accent. So we have to very much lean into that. But just so we've got some hints and tips, can you give anybody listening who's looking at getting, maybe they're stepping into their first allotment, maybe they've bought their first home and they want to have a go at growing a few vegetables and a few fruits at home. Can you give us any advice that you can give them as they start off?
I would always say grow what you eat, grow what
Yeah.
you like, grow what you eat. That is the number one key thing. But then,
Isn't that the name of a good book?
well, yeah, it could be, couldn't it? But it's true, isn't it? That it is so true. You've got to, if you're not going to eat it, why grow it, especially
Yep.
when it's
But
edible?
yeah, yeah, spot on.
Um, and then I would say go for things that are quite rewarding because as humans, we like things we're being brought up now for everything to be quick, everything to be instant.
Yeah.
So go for things that are a little bit quicker to get a reward, get that sort of like reward in there. So go for salad leaves or something quick like radish, carrots, lettuce, chard, whatever to start with, so that just within a month or two, you've got a reward, you've got that first harvest, and it gives you that boost to try something different.
Rob,
Um,
I think that's a really, really lovely point. So thank you for bringing that up. It's yeah, that's give yourself a bit of a quick win. Give yourself a little bit of
uh,
encouragement before
yeah,
you start dealing with the disappointments. Let's face it, it can be very disappointing some of the time.
it can be, but yeah, start with those quick wins and start with things. Don't be too disappointed if something doesn't work, because
Yeah.
when it doesn't work, it's simply another name for experience. You only gain experience from learning from when things go wrong to
Yeah.
make sure that they go right next time.
That's it. That's exactly the thing. So, Rob, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the podcast. For those of you not following along, do head over to Instagram. You've got a blog as well, and you're on Facebook. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, everything goes
same
through to
same same
Facebook as
u-
well.
same u- same username as well. So Rob's Allotment.
It's Rob's Allotment. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So go across and have a look and show his account some love. Thank you very much for joining me on today's podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you
you're
again
welcome.
soon.
Thanks a lot. See you later.
All right, bye bye.
Bye bye.
Talking with Rob just goes to prove that it's really important as a gardener to actually grow things that make you happy, whether that's fruit and vegetables and things that you can eat, or whether that's cut flowers which you can cut in and bring into the house or give away to family and friends. It's really important to follow your passion as a gardener and do exactly what makes you happy. I'm really looking forward to catching up with Rob, as well as a few of the other guests on the Gardener Ben podcast at the Chelsea Flower Show on the 19th of May. And of course, sharing with you live for the very, very first time any brand new rose varieties that are launched this coming season. But before that, there is the Gardeners World Solent Fair at Beaulieu to attend, and the Spirit of Water display at Salisbury Cathedral, which I'm looking forward to immensely. Back in my own garden, I'm going to be continuing to empty out the greenhouse. The succulents that have been stored in the greenhouse over the winter are slowly being acclimatised to being outside. I started by simply opening the doors and vents on the greenhouse every single day, allowing the plants to get used to having the elements such as the wind and changing temperatures back around their leaves. And now they're starting to move outside. I'll keep a close eye on them and, of course, on the weather, because it is not unusual for us to have a frost all the way through to the very end of May. And if the weather turns, I'll have to consider either taking them back inside or covering them up with an old dust sheet, just to give them some protection. But now the succulents are moving outside, it means the greenhouse can change gear and it can move towards its summer use. So the tomatoes will be potted up and placed into their pots, as well as the chilies, which I grow large quantities of to make sure that I have enough to produce my world famous red hot chili jam, which we eat all the way through the winter months. I'll also be continuing to keep an eye on the weather, and although it's been incredibly dry here on the south coast, we have had a couple of showers of rain, which have just been enough to wake up the pesky slugs and snails which are out in force munching their way through the tender perennials such as the hostas and the dahlias. Make sure that you remain vigilant and go out at dawn and dusk and make sure that you're picking off any offending slugs and snails. And keep up with your watering on of your garlic water solution. There's a recipe for this pinned to the very top of my Instagram profile. It's really cheap and simple to make, but needs to be reapplied regularly so the plant absorbs all of the garlicky taste and smell and becomes quite repulsive to slugs and snails to actually eat. Next week's guest on episode 13 of season 2 of the Gardener Ben podcast is John Williamson. He uses the username johnwilliamson.dartmoor on Instagram, and he's the maker of the Devon Stave basket, a very, very beautiful handmade basket now critically endangered in the UK. I first stumbled across his Instagram account around 4 or 5 years ago and immediately fell in love with these beautiful baskets, which are built for lifelong use in the garden and have a multitude of uses and simply get more attractive with age. I simply had to have one, so was bold enough to ask my parents for one for my 40th birthday, which they ordered and I received. Not many things that I'm gifted bring me to tears, but this basket is a true thing of beauty. It is an absolute joy to use, and one of the few of this particular size that John has ever made, being quite a large basket. I really enjoyed catching up with John and talking to him about the challenges that face this particular small craft and what led him to basket making in the first place. Catch my chat with John next week, and until then, happy gardening.